They call him Seatin, the man of legends.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lazy 61 Druid Guide. Now, right in front of you, as you may be able to see, is the spec. I won't talk too much about the spec because it's fairly obvious. 61 Druid, 10 in Shaman and 5 in Inquisitor, and the point allocation is sort of fairly straightforward. So what I'm going to go into is this spec is for fairly lazy people. It's a very easy spec to do, and the way that you can play it is you can play it with just a couple of buttons and macros. There's one sort of macro that you can put all your stuff together. However, this will result in a bit of a DPS loss of about 1000 to 1500 depending on sort of your gear level, etc. But regardless of which, it makes the spec a lot easier to play and more straightforward. So for this guide, because I'm lazy, I'm going to tell you how to play it the lazy way. If you'd like to play it the more advanced way, what I'll do is I'll attach links to forum posts which discuss sort of the order of priority if you want loads of buttons to press and, you know, make this build a lot more complicated, etc. But I'm just going to go over the basics and tell you a few tips and tricks of how to actually play this spec. So there are two sort of different things. There is a single target and AoE, and I'm going to go into single target first. So the pet you'll want to have for single target up is the Satyr Destroyer, and that is currently the best spec pet for single target. And when you initially run up to an enemy, what you want to do, the first thing is Eruption of Life, and then get up Crushing Force, followed by a Vex, and then you can pretty much start hitting your spam macro. Now, due to the way that your macro works, Eruption of Life will be constantly refreshed every 10 seconds, providing you are hitting the same target. However, both Crushing Force and Vex will not be refreshed, so you will need to continue applying them. They are both quite a considerable DPS increase to have, Vex and Crushing Force, so it's highly recommended that you continually apply and use both of them. So it's fairly straightforward, you know, you just keep your dots up and, you know, mash on your single target macro, the pet will do its job, etc. Now, in terms of how this spec actually compares with other specs, it is slightly behind Shaman in terms of DPS, and I believe when played correctly or in this way is roughly sort of the equivalent to Inquisitor. But however, the downside to this spec is it is actually very reliant on the pet doing damage. So there are certain raid encounters where this spec may not be a good idea, or where the pet, for example, may cause sort of danger to the raid, as in pulling additional mobs or attacking stuff that it shouldn't be attacking. So just be aware of that before you take this spec into raiding. However, it does serve a very good use in soloing content, etc., as the pets are notoriously known for taking reduced damage. You can also take out the 5 Inquisitor and replace it with 5 Justicar for increased self-healing, and use that to solo sort of a lot of old school raids. You do have the potential to do that in this build. I will also give a link to that build in the description of this video for anyone who's interested. So in terms of single target, it's fairly straightforward. Keep up your dots, as I've said before, and just mash your spam button. No cooldowns or anything to use, because the only cooldown, which is Fae Mimicry, is currently macroed into your single target macro. Now, in terms of actually dealing AoE damage and dealing with multiple targets, it works a bit differently. What you'll want to use for multiple targets is the pet known as the Greater Fairy Seer. I'm just going to summon that now. And you're also going to want to have Spirit of Upheaval on. If you notice, it's actually macroed into the AoE macro, so you'll automatically cast that buff whenever you go to AoE stuff. And you'll also want to have a toggled ability on called Fae Dispersion, which causes the Greater Fairy Seer's Bolt to hit 5 targets instead of 1. And now I'm just going to quickly show you how this works. So imagine this is a big group of mobs I've gone into AoE. What's going to happen is she's going to hit that The bolts are going to be flying everywhere. This is going to cause Spirit of Upheaval to be constantly bouncing, and if you look at the damage meter on the screen to the right, it's going to cause your damage to absolutely rocket through the roof. So in terms of AoE, it's really straightforward. Spam the AoE macro, which is essentially Wild Strike spam. Keep the Fairy Seer up, and make sure you have Fae Dispersion on. And literally, guys, the guide is as simple as that. You know, there is no sort of additional stuff to it, apart from you can take certain stuff out of the single target macro and separate it if you wish to get increased DPS, but that gets a lot more complicated. So I'll attach a link to a forum thread which explains exactly how to do that if you wish, but be aware it does, you know, complicate this entire build and rotation by a significant amount. Anyway, thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, comments, or anything at all, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And if you're looking for more of this top quality content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel.